Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome back to the Spiritual Path. I'm Kim Gilster, and this is Hafizullah Fifi.
Hello.
Good morning, Hafizullah.
Or good something, wherever it is that you are.
That's true.
So,
good point. It's only morning for us, isn't it? It could be evening for someone else.
It could be evening for someone else. We have listeners in Australia and New Zealand. Whether or not they're actually, yeah, we do. This is pretty cool.
And Peru that I know of. Yeah, lots of people south of that equator, right?
Yeah.
England,
so,
I know.
Yeah, we have
So
fans
we're
there.
tackling a really big subject today. Subject today is spiritual bypassing. What is it? How does it work, or rather not work? And what do we do about it to actually further our expansion and our growth? Yay! Anyway, I saw online, and you posted this on Facebook, that you posted this little ditty, and who was it from? We said you wanted to
Robert
read it
Augustus
on
Masters, Robert Augustus Masters has been a psychonaut and consciousness researcher for a very long time. And he has he has a lot of very cogent observations about this thing that we're in of spiritual transformation. And he's had a lot of experience in a lot of different modalities. And so before I read this, perhaps, Kim, you and I can state from our joint and several entry points perspectives what we mean by the term spiritual bypass. And I'll go first on that, and perhaps you can spring off from there. What I mean by that term is the notion or the procedure that there's something wrong with certain feelings that we have about ourselves, about our world, about our process. There's something wrong with us, something wrong with what we feel. There's something wrong in our experience. And that in order to become something called spiritual, we need to avoid those. We need to compartmentalize them some way. We need to not give them energy. And we need to do certain things to stay out of those parts of our experience so that hopefully they don't influence us, or perhaps they will actually die on the vine from lack of nourishment given by our...
Yes.
Was that too wordy?
No, it absolutely wasn't too wordy. I thought it was absolutely spot on. I personally don't feel like I could even add anything to that.
Okay.
You know.
So I will...
Because in a nutshell, that's what it is. It is avoidance. It's avoiding who you are and not loving the full self. You know, and it's this space of judgment. You know,
it's a space of judgment
that we get into.
It's judging our own experience. And that judgment of our own experience is usually a very difficult thing to witness.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's very hard
and I recommend for people, right, and I often, when I'm coaching, I often recommend for people to, go about reading things and find where they're feeling like they're judging others. Because essentially when we're judging others, what we're doing is judging ourselves.
We're judging ourselves.
Because what we're feeling in that moment is, some kind of victimhood or not good enough or.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing, victim and perpetrator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's never the case. People don't.
Well, there's also this notion that creeps in here, and I've got a whole set of hobby horses around pop spirituality.
Yeah.
From my perspective, having been fetched up and then largely abandoned because I got as much of it from it as I could, a particular spiritual tradition, each of us has a potential for deep transformation. And I can say that my life and my being have been transformed beyond recognition by the path that I've walked and what I've received according to my poor capacity from my teachers and the tradition that I've worked in primarily. And so I have a sense of what's possible for a human being. And perhaps it's my judgment or perhaps just an acerbic observation that many people don't engage their own transformation at the potential of which they are capable. And just as there's junk food, there's junk culture, and there's junk spirituality. And exactly what that looks like, that could be a whole show all by itself, but right now we're focusing on this thing that we're calling the spiritual bypass. So I'll read this riff by Robert Augustus Masters, and I don't actually have the context from which this came. This just showed up in my Facebook feed. But he says, what spiritual bypassing would have us rise above is precisely what we need to enter, and enter deeply, with as little self-numbing as possible. To this end, it is crucial that we see through whatever practices we have, spiritual or otherwise, that tranquilize rather than illuminate and awaken us.
Yes.
So I'm going to do that again because there's a lot that's packed into that.
Do it again.
What,
I love it.
I'll do it again. What spiritual bypassing would have us rise above precisely what we need to enter, and enter deeply with as little self-numbing as possible. So I'm going to come back to that. To this end, it is crucial that we see through whatever practices we have, spiritual or otherwise, that tranquilize rather than illuminate and awaken us. So back to this thing of self-numbing.
Numbing? Yes.
Numbing.
Well, we could get
Numbing.
into, I think that's a good segue into drugs. It's been my experience that to a point, all drugs are useful. They absolutely are. They, by and large, have been put on the earth and or created in labs for good reasons. I've had many experiences with various types of drugs. You and I have discussed that in private. Okay, so let's take marijuana, for instance. I see a lot of people who, are touting marijuana and I do believe marijuana should be legal. I think all drugs should be legal, actually. But, yeah, because it's, again, I believe that, personal responsibility is important here. But that's a whole other subject. Anyway, we could have a whole show about that as well. But so take marijuana. In my experience with marijuana, it did help me in the beginning when I would smoke it. it was, definitely something that allowed me to, de-stress and to really, get into myself. And being who I am with, like, all of the Scorpio in my charts and whatever, my energetic alignment, I got very deeply philosophical oftentimes when I would smoke marijuana. It helped me to see a lot of things about myself that I was unaware of. However, with continued use of it, it became numbing. It became, a space of, I actually, and I became more dependent upon it for that, right? And then luckily for me, what happened, and this was, way back when I was much younger, but what happened is we went through a dry period. This was before, way before things were legal at all. I'm in California, and here you can, get marijuana pretty easily. But way before it was legal, and what ultimately ended up happening was that we went through a dry period, and I was used to smoking very, very potent stuff. And all that was around was what I considered to be very weak, and so, it did nothing for me, and so I stopped. And then what happened when, the stuff that I had enjoyed previously came back, I would take one or two tokes, and all of a sudden I would be really, really high. That was actually useful for me. It made me realize that, wow, okay, I was actually, often in this altered state. And did I really need to be in this altered state in order to be aware? Or could I be in a different state? Could I embrace something else? And believe it or not, that actually fit me much more consciously on my, the first parts of my spiritual journey. I was only 19 years old at the time. So as you can see, yes, it can be useful. It can. But we need to be very discerning when utilizing these things. Recently, I had, been getting a calling to engage in ayahuasca. I haven't done it yet. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it. But I'm being very discerning about it. There are many, many reasons for that. I know that by, engaging in this hallucinogen, I've engaged in peyote and, mushrooms, again, mostly when I was younger. Before, but I know that, the ayahuasca in and of itself, even if I choose to engage in it, is only a tool. And my intention in engaging in it is to utilize it as a tool to expand me that much more in that, moment. And then use it while I'm conscious and not utilizing the drug to expand that much more through that experience. Okay. So when we're dealing with drugs like that, with, the hallucinogenic or even the marijuana, these sorts of drugs, you still have to take that personal responsibility of then saying, okay, I'm using this, but it's, simply a tool, and it will eventually be a tool that, I can walk out of. And I know that you had an experience with it where you found that it just wasn't the medicine for you. You talked about that.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about. Okay, I've done my share of marijuana and psychedelics. The last time I had any marijuana was quite a while ago, and basically, I had put it aside for a chunk of time, and then came back to it, and this was after a period of fairly intense meditation and yoga and cleaning up my diet and a whole bunch of things. And it felt like my consciousness was crammed into a little tiny box. And I decided, okay, this has outlived its usefulness for me. I had actually I wouldn't say a similar experience on ayahuasca. Now, I took it on several occasions in the company of authentic ayahuasca masters from Brazil back in the 90s before it was a thing. And the set and setting that the master, created in the room was amazing. I know a few things about creating sacred space, and what he did was masterful. And the holding for people's process was exquisite. And the reason that I decided, once invited, to participate was that these guys looked like energetically and in their consciousness looked like the old dervishes that I had met in Turkey. So I said, why not? And the end of these occasions, or the end of my work with it, shall we say, was when ayahuasca, the being embodied in what they call the tea, said, this is not your tool. You don't need this.
Correct.
I
had a similar thing with marijuana, actually. I hadn't engaged in it in, 2 years at all. And, somebody, I was at a person's home for a barbecue. And somebody had made homemade edibles, and I asked them, what exactly did they use to make it, et cetera. And it seemed like, okay, this is something that I might be interested in engaging in. I don't know. I was just called to it. And, yeah, when you said that, you had that feeling of, your awareness being very small, that's what it was like for me, and it lasted for 2 days.
That's about exactly. Same thing for me. It was a whole day, and it took me several weeks. It took me about 6 weeks actually to clean my system out enough that the residue was not affecting the refinement, the very refined level of awareness that I had come across in my spiritual practice up to that point.
Yes.
So, it is different for everybody. And I will also say that our egoic process around external aids and, shall we say, crutches is sometimes very, very subtle. And the nature of the personal ego, by and large, is that it was created out of a sense of something missing, or out of a wound from a different entry point, much the same thing. And our personal ego is oriented towards what's missing rather than what's complete, because it doesn't really know anything about what's complete. It doesn't really have the capacity to know that. And
correct, which is why when we go into these things, we should be going into them with the attitude of wanting that completion. And as as is happening to me right now, you will, if these things should be a part of your reality, and not just the drugs, but, any kind of other healing, like energetic healing, we could even say acupuncture or, Reiki or herbs or diet or. These things are only tools to get us to where we want to be. But we have to, do these things in that way and realize and acknowledge the fact that these things are also always changing, because as we get to a certain level of awareness, then we need different things to complement us, to help us.
Yes.
to
Yes.
get to where we need to go.
The thing that I discovered subsequently is that the Sufis, the Buddhists, and the yogis already have names for all the different states that one encounters in drug experiences. So it's like the territory is already known. And while it has been my experience that rightly used, and I don't mean dropping acid at a party, I mean with a sacred intention and hopefully with a guide,
Yes, because as aware a person
you
as
can,
I am, I have no
become,
intention of doing the ayahuasca, without a competent guide at all.
Oh, there would be no sense in it. Backing up half a step and explicating something that you and I have been implying in this riff, which is that it's not in the drug. It's in our own deep substance. All the drug can do is give us a view. Now, if we've lived our lives in a dark room, which is essentially what egoic consciousness is, it's a dark room, and the shade goes up, that's going to be a revelation. Oh my God, I had no idea. But since we've lived our lives in the dark room, we have no way of knowing whether the window is filthy dirty, or maybe that 100-year-old glass where it's all kind of wavy and distorted.
Exactly.
Or whether it's polished and clear, and even if the window is perfectly clear, that's still not the same thing. And regardless of how many times we look out that window, it's not the same thing as going out the door. And so the whole work of integrating the awarenesses that we come upon, either through meditation and other spiritual practice or through drug experiences, that work still has to be done. Revisiting the drug is not going to assist in and I'm sorry, I know that people listening to this are going to argue with me about this, but I've been doing this for 40 years, and I'm here to tell you that you really have to do the integration work not stoned and not on a substance. Otherwise, the kind of a trail of breadcrumbs.
You lack the awareness for it.
You really do. You lack the connection between what
just the way that is.
Traditional spiritual practice does, whether you're on retreat or whether you're in life, doing it through a tantric in the traditional meaning of that word, engaging the stuff of life as your spiritual practice. You establish kind of a trail of breadcrumbs between your ordinary felt sense of self and these higher states. And revisiting those higher states
and I hate to,
from the entry point from...
But we've been spending the past 25 minutes talking about drugs.
Okay. Let's get back to the spiritual bypass then. I can do this riff some other time.
Other ways to bypass, because we didn't have an intention of doing a show just on drugs and their use spiritually or not. But I think the reason why we decided to actually do a show on spiritual bypassing is because I think both of us have been noticing this. A lot of things have been going on in the world that are uncomfortable, to say the least.
Oh, agonizing. Agonizing.
Yeah, I mean, just this morning when I I did, my breathing and my meditation work, and I had my coffee, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get on Facebook, and I was going to, post some things about the show coming up. What's in my face is, what's going on in France, and we have like France and Turkey, and those are just like the two recent. Just this week we had Orlando go on. I lost count. It's not just terrorism either. There's just so many trying things that are going on right now. And, there's nothing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with deciding that, I feel overwhelmed. And so I'm going to look away momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because that's actually useful. The problem
that's the right use.
When we look away, the problem becomes is that when we look away, okay, doing it permanently, or when we look away, actually engaging in avoidance, whether that is through the drugs, whether it is not, it's through, I'm going to go and get some Reiki healing or massage or whatever. Those things are useful to get you there. But once you're in a more calm space with things, you still need to look at it, You don't necessarily need to go back and look at the graphic violence and whatever, but you need to look at what is going on in this planet. We need to, and my first thing that I do with these sorts of things is I say, okay, this person or these persons are seen as being perpetrators, right? So how do I find compassion for those people? How do I find it inside of myself to understand them with the awareness and the knowledge that I have? And yes, I gain a lot of my knowledge by going online and reading and really understanding and watching documentaries and doing my best. If it's a subculture, a different culture for me, et cetera, I do my best to really look in the eye and understand as much as I can why. Because that's the way. Because I have to learn to actually love that darkness. To love that and not offer up resistance to it. Meanwhile, I'm also loving what it is that's seen as darkness inside of myself. Okay? And there is a time where we do, on our path. I believe that everybody needs those year or two or however long that it takes for you, okay, to just really spend your time more going inside and really working on the self and getting into the space of not judging the self before you can really be able to come out and do that. But if you can't come out and do that and you're saying, I'm sending all of this loving energy out there and I'm helping the world, you're doing so from a space of judgment, consciously or not. So then what you're doing is you're creating a rift. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong. Okay, it's just a realization that, this is what's occurring. Oftentimes it's what needs to occur. It's what's been occurring. It's why all of this stuff is really surfacing. The racism that we're seeing. How could I forget about that, right? Or, that's all of these things that are really coming to the surface. I'm quite happy that they're coming to the surface. They're difficult, yeah. But they've always been there. But they were in hiding.
Yes.
And why? Because these people were what? Afraid of being judged. How can we help someone if they can't come to us? However it looks. However they're working on, dealing with it at the time. Whether they're dealing with it, and trust me, in their reality, they are dealing with it by killing people. That's their reality, is the only way that they know how to deal with it. Why? Because somebody was blaming them and somebody was judging them prior to that. Okay? before it got so bad. And they were judging themselves, and they were adding insult to injury, insult to injury over and over. And then we get groups of people like this.
Mm-hmm.
We get a few people, and they kidnap children, and or whatever, or women, and then they have them bear children, and they raise these children in this state of fear. We can call it hate, it is, but ultimately, at its core, it's fear. And yet, people sit there and they judge it. And judging is absolutely bypassing. If you find yourself, and we all do it to a certain extent, okay? I have it almost mastered, really. But I still it sneaks in there every once in a while, and, but I take it upon myself. What is it about myself that I'm not approving of? What is it about myself that I'm judging? What is it about me that I'm trying to control? Okay? Because I know that the only way to actually find a solution is for me to get in that space and for as many others as possible to get into that space. It's true. I've seen it happen in my own personal reality, that when I'm in the space that I'm in, my family, my neighbors, just all these, and that's just my personal, and of course, the people I work with, can find that space in themselves because I can hold the space for it.
Yeah.
So if we're all doing that, then the terrorist people or the racist people or the sexist people or these people, we stand a chance because they stand a chance, because they're part of the whole, and they deserve our love, just as, maybe more so in some ways than others.
Maybe more so, sure.
Yeah,
because
they're in more pain,
imagine their internal condition where they feel so compelled to address their pain by creating destructiveness outside of themselves. It's horrific. I want to come back to something.
And even the people up at the top that are in that fear from the greed and the power hungry greed that they're in. That's all fear.
It is all fear.
Yeah, they're
I want to come back to something that you said.
I
want to come back to something that you said about judgment. There's a very subtle psychology there that I want to highlight and bring out and expand upon just a little bit, where you said that judgment is avoidance. When we judge ourselves, we're creating a split between the self that defines a standard and the self that we're actually living. And we're saying, that self that I'm really living here in concrete 3D, 4D reality, these thoughts, these feelings, these actions that I had, it's not really me. I'm not really that person. And so there's this egoic identification with a particular standard, however exalted or wherever it came from. It could have come from your spiritual teacher. It doesn't matter. It could have come from the highest teaching given by any human being, but if we identify with it egoically, we create a split in our own being. And in the disowning of what I'm actually doing in 3D, 4D reality, the observable things that I'm judging, we are compartmentalizing that into a me and a not me. And we are basically jailing the life force and all of the potentials in that thing that we're judging. And this is a deep wound to our own being that we are perpetrating on ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
And
it also
so
goes
the question, the question
we
is,
could have a whole thing on a whole show on judgment too. Go ahead.
well, that's kind of what we're doing, because the spiritual bypassing is in a sense a self-judgment. We've been saying that.
Yes, it absolutely is.
The question is not whether I should look at those things, but where do I find the support to engage those things that I'm so reactive to?
Yes.
And that's the only real question. We don't have to know where it came from. It doesn't matter whether it came from past lives. It doesn't matter whether it came from our upbringing. It doesn't matter where it came from. Asking why just generates more and more why, and is another form of avoidance. The only useful question is, where do I find the strength? Where do I find the awareness? Where do I find the support to face this in myself and mud wrestle with my demons, and finally make friends with them, so that I can
because
re-engage.
The reprogramming, because the reprogramming that I do does exactly that. That's how it works. Because you're not going in and asking through your brain, you're just saying, take me to the first time that I felt this way. Okay, and then we're going in and we're, like you said, facing the demon, which more times than not is not, as an adult, in our conscious mind, usually not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's just the feeling that's the big deal, that the trauma, the feeling, and that's the demon, And
that's what we find out.
And, absolutely.
That's what we discover in finally going right to the bottom of our personal hell, is that there is nothing there to be afraid of. We're afraid of experiencing pain, but the pain that we perpetrate on ourselves by half a lifetime or a whole lifetime of avoidance is much, much greater than the momentary spike, the few minutes or perhaps the half a day or however long that it takes to engage these deep wounds and really bring them to the surface where they can be healed. And once they're healed, they're done. And it really, really is possible to heal the deepest wounds that human beings can experience, because our essential nature, our true nature, is that of wholeness. And there isn't any one of us who in this human incarnation is so badly damaged or so so sinful, or however it is that you frame it for yourself, that we can't heal those wounds, those petty insults, and become the magnificent beings that we really came here to be in the first place. And all of the material, the wounds, all of the psychological stuff, all of the past life stuff that we took on, all of that crap is the fuel, is the jet fuel for the journey. It's in facing and surmounting and overcoming those things and reintegrating all of the capacities that were kind of buried and banked up and imprisoned by our avoidance. That's how we come into our full spiritual power, so that we become fearless.
It absolutely
and
is.
So
but
that we, yeah.
Okay.
And that's how we become what we came here to do.
This is not a lecture. Okay, so what I wanted to put out there right now is I would like to put it out there that you can call into the show. The number is 347-989-1180. We are open to any questions that you might have to what it is that you have going on. in your reality right now, questions that you have about, how can you effectively actually utilize a lot of what it is that is available to you, because we're not saying that utilizing these drugs is unto itself bad. There is no black and white, or energy healing, or any sort of healing. Again, they're all here for a reason. If used correctly, they're wonderful, wonderful tools. But yeah, so if you have something that you have going on, or you would like to know maybe ways that you can get help personally, then please do feel free to call in. Again, the number is 347-989-1180. Absolutely. And I wanted to address something that, while we're waiting for people to call in, I wanted to address something that you were saying, is framing it for yourself. Okay, so when we think about it, we are oftentimes framing it in what is, for lack of better terminology, a negative context, right? Because that's, what we learned, how we learned it, that's part of our programming. So we frame this in a negative context. The thing is that if we can frame it, if we have the power to frame things in a negative context for ourselves, then we have the power to frame it in what most people would call a positive context, or what I like to look at as the sort of context that gives me what it is that I want. Okay? Because following our true desires is very important. That's part of the problem, actually, with why we avoid. We want to feel better, okay? But we're not taking that personal responsibility and reframing things to feel better. We're allowing ourselves to be dependent upon something outside. And also, this can be what we consider to be love. And what causes codependence in relationships is because we're looking outside of ourselves to give ourselves love, right? I'm looking to another person to provide that for me. I'm looking for several people to provide that for me. Or I can look to something like sex to provide that for me. Or I can look to something like exercise to provide that for me. Or I can look to something like diet to provide that for me. Or. Those things cannot actually provide you with ultimately what you want, with your own happiness, your own self-love. Okay? They can add to your experience. Anything outside of yourself, even other people, are simply working to add to your experience. Okay? So any desires that we have are actually desires to help us to expand our awareness. And with that, there's going to be pain. There's going to be pain. There is no way around that except, I had to discover that. I get people all the time. I get them in touch because one of the things I get them in touch with who they are as spirit, and then you have to integrate it. Okay? And the reason for that is because, in all actuality, you would cease to live on this planet anymore. And that's okay if you want to leave. But if you're consciously here because there are things that you're, expanding upon and helping with the expansion of, those things that are here, et cetera, then you need to integrate. And part of that integration is, integrating in the soul space. And in integrating in the soul space, your desires are going to return. I can remember sitting there in, meditation and asking, because I'm all, in that blissed out space. I had been there for months, where, sweeping the floor is a miraculous event. But what it did was it gave me almost no desire. And I was asking, where's my motivation? I feel absolutely, not motivated by anything at all. And because I asked for that, I got it. Because there was a part of me that knew, my true being, if you would like to call it my spirit, that knew that I needed some sort of motivation, that I needed to integrate my full space and, and my body and the 3D and, all of that sort of thing. But when I started doing that, because for a few months there was like pretty much no pain, and then I started to experience pain again. And then I had to rework and learn ways to actually deal with pain on a different level, because the pain in and of itself actually in some ways becomes greater because I have a much more expanded awareness and I could see totality. At the same time, I had the information with that awareness to be able to deal with it, because I'm able to see variance on a very wide scale and beyond the earth, actually. So, part of what I do is I go, I look at that. Oh, okay, this is what's going on. Okay, well, but it doesn't mean the energy is still not present with me. It absolutely is. But what I do instead is to work on transmuting that energy. And I'm capable of actually transmuting it because I'm not afraid of it. I'm not judging it. I am just embracing what it is. I actually put a post up on my Facebook after, I forget which event had happened. There's been so many, but it was, last week, I believe. And I was just really, really feeling the totality of the pain that's been going on with so many people. And I said, my heart's bleeding. My heart is absolutely bleeding. And the only thing that I can describe it as is love. It's pain, but it's love. And, I've talked to several people about this, and, it's in a way, and being in a female body, even though I haven't had children, I'm aware of that, and, it's akin to what a mother goes through when she is giving birth. She knows that on the other side of that is going to be this beautiful being that she's bringing into the world, But she goes through 9 months of excruciating pain, really, because it's not just the birthing. The birthing is the sort of end-all of a lot of the pain. Well, there's still some afterwards, but But, I've been watching a lot of pregnant women lately, which is interesting. A lot of women around me have recently given birth, and watching them during the last, month of their pregnancy, and before that, they're like, oh, I'm so happy, I'm going to have this baby, and then they're suddenly like, get out of my body. And I'm so swollen, and their hormones are going everywhere, and they're in excruciating pain, But at the same time, there's also this sense of themselves where they're coming back and they're saying, okay, I understand what this is about. And so on the spiritual journey is very much akin to that. If you want to understand it, like intellectually, what it is that we're talking about, and, going through that darkness, find a woman who's pregnant and just watch her if she's, open, and there's a lot of women who are, about her process. Like, what does that look like? Right? It's very similar. We actually have somebody who's calling in. We only have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and let them talk to us. Okay? All right. So here we go. Hello.
Hello.
Miss Ghoster. Hi. Who are
Hi,
we speaking
this is
to?
Crystal.
Hi, Crystal. How are you today?
Good. So it was perfect timing because you were talking about like pregnancy and loss and all that. And while I was listening to the call, like I was trying to think of this topic in terms of like as you're, wanting to pass that knowledge down or that information down children, and what does that look like, and what tips can you give in this topic, especially when, like you guys were discussing, it is going around a lot, and we're seeing it more and more. And as we're seeing it, we're also, the younger generation is also, like, exposed to it, and they're going through so many, like, energies and growth and, learning as a parent, like, what is it that I can do to better support them through the process from a non-resistant
Okay, what you can do, Crystal, what you can do is become a emotionally, spiritually, mentally free being. The essential stuff, the real stuff of any spiritual path can't really be, and life is a spiritual path. We're all on the spiritual path.
Right.
Every sentient being is on the spiritual path in its unique way. And the essential stuff can't be taught.
Right.
So all the wonderful stuff I've been saying here is not really a teaching, it's just a direction.
Right.
It can't be taught, it has to be caught. And if you want your children and the people around you to catch it from you, you have to have something that you actually have to have some deep substance that you live in, that you swim in, that is your being, that they can catch from you by sympathetic vibration, regardless of the kind of words and images and how-tos that you wrap around it. And so there is that openness to experience that each one of us can develop and expand and make more and more profound. The technical term for it is compassion. That's the term in Buddhism. It's the term in Sufism. It's compassion, but it's really openness. It's a total openness to experience. It's just, yep, this is how it is. And in that, you enter into a realm and a mode of being that is very, very fluid, and that doesn't either push away things, nor does it grab onto them like you grab onto a life preserver. And so, most of us are drowning. Many of us are drowning, and the world will toss us a life ring, and then we won't let go of it when we finally get on dry land. And we have to train ourselves. We have to train our egos. We have to train our reactivity to let go of the things that were once supports for us and keep moving. And so if there's a prescription, that's the prescription. Become a free being. And then your children, people around you, will get a very clear reflection of what is authentic for them in a way that doesn't have judgment, in a way that's not contaminated with fear or rage. And that's exactly what it is, and it's not easy.
Does that make sense for you, Crystal?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And the thing about childbirth, that's wonderful, not as though I know something about it, but let's say I've observed some things, is that moment when you absolutely have to surrender to the process. And you're birthing something, and you're stretching, and it's something amazing is being pulled out of you by forces that you can't steer and you can't control, and all you can do is go along for the ride. And that, in a certain way, is a metaphor for how it is that all of us can birth ourselves and live into deeper and deeper levels of authenticity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's been my experience, and I mean, sometimes I do it on the daily. Because we're constantly expanding. It's just, it's who we are. And
when
so,
we're really awake,
I
it's every
give birth
breath.
to different. Yes, exactly. Exactly. There's just, again, it's there's no resistance on my part. I can just feel it happening. And it's almost like daily that I get a, like one that's like much more, like this more forward movement. Oh, okay, hello, But it's again, it's not like an really. It just is. It's wonderful. Anyway, we only have about 4 minutes left. I hope you found that to be enlightening, Crystal.
Yes, I wanted to thank you both for this topic and your show. I really appreciate it.
And Crystal, thank you for calling in. That was a great question.
Thanks.
It was.
Is there any? A wonderful question, a perfect question. Is there anything else before we go that you might want to say to us?
No, I'm just really soaking it all in. So, thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing more topics too. I'm really excited. So, really appreciate it.
Maybe we should do another show because this is a big topic.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoy it.
It really is.
So, thank you.
I do too. All right. Bye, dear.
Bye.
Hello. Are you still there? Coffee?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the part of the show where we get to plug our stuff. I am Kim Gelster, Spiritual Synergist. You can find all sorts of things out about me, about my services. I do life coaching. I do psychic readings. People call me guru. What can I say? I am very humbled by that. Or you can, and you can find out more about me on my website at kimgelster.com or on YouTube at Kim Gelster, the Spiritual Synergist. I also have a Facebook page, which is, again, Kim Gelster, the Spiritual Synergist, and a Facebook group, Kim Gelster, the Spiritual Synergist. Or you can follow me on Twitter under the Spiritual Synergist. Anyway, and you, Hafizullah?
Well, on Facebook, I'm Hafizullah Sufi, S-U-F-I. You can also find me different places under Hafizullah Chishti, C-H-I-S-H-T-I. Chishti is the name of the root lineage that, of Sufi lineage that I come from, and as a lineage holder, I get to append that to my Dharma name as a kind of surname identifier. I have a website, I have a blog, Illumined Living, ILLUMINED living.com, and you can also find that in About on my Facebook page, and you can also find me on YouTube, although I have not put anything there in quite a long time. I'm well overdue for more stuff on the YouTube channel. And we're here every couple of weeks doing just what we do.
Yes, we are.
Come join us
again. You never
again.
know what we'll be up to next. I am too. Anyway, until next time, you know what? Have a wonderful, 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 loving life. Bye-bye.